My boss brought his sister-in-law to the company to work as an accountant and announced that from now on all expenses had to be reimbursed strictly according to regulations. I had just gone through an exhausting week to secure a 5 million yuan contract for the company. However, because the client had used 2 extra packs of tissues, the average cost per person exceeded 8 yuan. The accountant crossed her arms, looked at the reimbursement form I had placed on her desk, and sneered. 5,080 yuan. Last night I ate at Yen Cam Lao and signed the contract with General Director Li. General Director Trong was there too. I already tried to explain. The average cost per person exceeded 8 yuan, so it can't be reimbursed. She slammed the form against me. What does General Director Trong have to do with anything? Don't think that just because you closed a 5 million deal you can do whatever you want. Accounting must follow regulations. Everyone is the same. I took a deep breath, knowing it was useless to reason with her, and decided to call General Director Trong. He said, I did say it would be reimbursed. But that doesn't mean you have the right to violate company policy. It's only 5,000 yuan. You signed such a big contract, surely you're not short on commission. Young people should think long-term. I said nothing more, turned around, and refused to accept the package containing the 5 million yuan contract. Smiling as I explained, company policy states that any delivery requiring payment from the recipient must be rejected. Besides, today is my last working day here. Tomorrow I'll be joining General Director Li's company. At that time, as a client, I'll be the one setting the rules. I replied, 3,000 of that was for taxis. Why didn't we take illegal cabs? They're much cheaper. Vong Tuyat Mai was so furious she lost control and blurted it out. I gave a cold smile. Director Vong, company policy requires valid invoices. Where would I get legitimate receipts from illegal cabs? Her pointing finger trembled with rage, leaving her speechless. The entire conference room fell silent. General Director Trong was so angry he nearly had a heart attack. But in front of the staff he could only grit his teeth and say, reimburse them. Vong Tuyat Mai leaned close and whispered viciously, just you wait. After the meeting, I noticed several colleagues who used to be close to me starting to keep their distance. Truthine secretly texted me that people friendly with me were being given a hard time by Vong Tuyat Mai when submitting reimbursements. And she warned us to be careful who we associated with. Not to imitate certain people who bent the rules. Rage flared inside me. I hadn't wanted to fight her. But now she was dragging others into it. At that moment, an important client came to visit. He specifically wanted to meet me. The employee who had closed the 5 million contract. General Director Trong ordered me to attend the lunch reception. I understood it was a trap. But I couldn't refuse. When I entered the room, besides the director and the client, Vong Tuyat Mai was there too. Chatting with them, she looked at me with icy eyes. She smiled at the client and said, is a 5 million contract really that easy to sign? I heard General Director Li likes drinking with Hạ Nghiên. She's quite generous, isn't she? Ha ha, sounds like she sacrifices a lot for the company, right? Her words carried a clear insinuation that I'd used improper methods to secure the deal. The atmosphere at the table instantly turned tense, and President Tun's expression grew strange. I took a deep breath, forcing down my anger, and smiled stiffly. Director Vong is joking. General Director Li chose to cooperate because he appreciates our company's capabilities and proposal. Vong Tuyat Mai turned to President Tun and smiled meaningfully. President Tun, if you ever need anything special, just tell Hạ Nghiên. She knows how to satisfy you. My whole body trembled with fury. She actually dared treat me like a commodity. President Tun only gave an awkward laugh and said nothing. I couldn't endure it any longer and spoke up. Director Vong, you're slandering my reputation without evidence. According to the law, that constitutes defamation. Her expression changed instantly. Who are you trying to scare? General Director Trong, who had pretended not to hear, finally scolded lightly. Tuyat Mai, what are you saying? Apologize to Tiu Ha right now. When he needed me to sign contracts he called me Hạ Nghiên sweetly. But when defending his sister-in-law he switched to Tiuha so he could scold me more easily. I laughed in anger and took out my phone. Ready to record. Just then General Director Lee, from the 1 million yuan contract, called saying he needed to verify a few details. I used the call as an excuse and left the table. As the head of the company's top-performing sales department, I'd drawn attention from quite a few companies. But out of loyalty I'd never wavered. Perhaps it was time to seriously reconsider my future. When I met Lee, we quickly reviewed the contract terms. Everything went smoothly without a problem. He happily closed the folder and said, "Tomorrow you can wait to receive the delivery." I glanced at my watch, it was past 7 p.m., and took the initiative. President Lee, everyone worked hard all day on my contract and is still working overtime at this hour. Let me treat everyone to dinner as a small thank you and celebration. He was delighted and agreed immediately. Then he joked, "Oh right, Hạ Nghiên, I heard the meal you treated at Yen Cam Lao wasn't reimbursed. Why's that? Does your company think my order wasn't worth a dinner?" He burst out laughing, clearly treating it as gossip. A sharp ache pierced my chest. But I could only force a smile. President Lee really did get information fast. Good news never traveled far. But bad news spread everywhere. He said seriously, "Working at that company is a waste of your talent. Have you ever thought about working for me?" My heart stirred slightly, but I smiled evasively. "President Lee, I haven't even received the bonus for this contract yet. If I switched jobs now, I'd lose too much." He laughed. "Then let's make a bet. If you don't receive your bonus for this contract, seriously consider my offer, all right?" When it was time to pay, I used the company card issued specifically for the sales department. It was a reserve fund for reasonable and unexpected client expenses. The machine declined the payment. I called the bank, and they informed me my account had been frozen. According to policy, accounts could only be frozen if a department was dissolved or involved in major violations. It couldn't be done arbitrarily. Clearly, this was targeted at me. I struggled to suppress the urge to smash my phone and immediately called Vong Tuyet Mai. "Director Vong," I said coldly, "why has the sales department's reserve account been frozen?" She replied calmly, as if prepared, "Recently the company has been tightening risk control, so unnecessary accounts have been temporarily frozen. It's a normal procedure." I laughed in anger. "I'm hosting President Lee's team right now, the same client who just signed a 5 million contract with us. Is that an unnecessary expense?" "Watch your tone," she snapped. "Does the company's financial work have to be reported to you step by step? If you're entertaining clients, you can pay first and get reimbursed later." Thinking of the trouble I'd faced over that earlier 5,000, and the obstacles she could create afterward, I could almost picture her satisfaction on the other end of the line. I clenched my teeth, barely holding myself back. At that moment, President Lee took out his wallet, pulled out a card, and handed it to the waiter. "Use mine," he said casually. I started to object, but he raised a hand to silence me. "This dinner is on me, and what I told you will always stand." The next morning, a notice appeared in the company group chat. Employees whose performance evaluations failed to meet standards would not receive quarterly bonuses. The list was posted, and my name was at the top. Fury exploded inside me. I rushed straight to General Director Trong's office. "I just signed a 5 million contract for the company. How can you say I didn't meet standards?" I shouted. Vong Tuyet Mai's voice sounded from behind me. "Performance evaluations include many factors. They can't be based on sales alone." I laughed coldly. "Should I compete to see who flatters better? Or who follows your absurdly rigid rules better?" "Hạ Nghiên." General Director Trong slammed the desk and stood up. "Watch your attitude." Vong Tuyet Mai spoke in an aggrieved tone. "She's spreading harmful ideas that damage the company's image." I laughed in anger. "Vong Tuyet Mai, are you using that excuse to keep my bonus? Do you people have any shame?" His face darkened. He roared, "You've gone too far. What the company gives you is yours. If it doesn't give it, don't ask. Signing contracts is your basic duty. Doing it well is only natural. Bonuses are granted by the company, It doesn't mean you deserve them. I sneered, my voice icy. Very good. The rules are set by you. And the right to interpret them belongs to you too. I have nothing more to say. I turned and walked back to my desk. Behind me, Vong Tuyet Mai mocked. When someone doesn't know their place, you have to cure that habit at the root. 10 minutes later, General Director Trong hurried to my desk. Hạ Nghiên, President Lee said the 5 million contract was delivered. Why don't I see it on your desk? I answered calmly. I refused to accept it. The delivery required payment from the recipient. Company policy clearly states our position on that. So I refused. Also, today is my last working day here. Tomorrow I'll be an employee of President Lee's company. At that point, I'll be the one deciding the rules. Trong Trak burst out laughing. Ha ha, Hạ Nghiên, are you crazy? He pointed at me, laughing so hard tears streamed down his face. Who do you think you are? What kind of place do you think President Lee's company is? Who would take someone we've evaluated as unqualified like you? Hearing this, Vong Tuyet Mai rushed out of the finance office and immediately joined in with a scornful tone. Exactly. I think she's suffered such a shock she's started hallucinating. As for your clients and your so-called decisions, if you want to resign, then go. Don't stay here making a joke of yourself. The two of them spoke back and forth, trying to grind me into the dirt and ruin my reputation completely. Just then, the phone in Trong Trak's pocket rang. Irritated, he pulled it out, but when he saw the name on the screen his expression instantly changed, tense. Deferential, he cleared his throat, answered, and his voice turned cheerful at once. Hello, President Lee. Greetings. I was just about to contact you. I heard the contract's been sent. I wonder how you find it. Before he could finish, President Lee's hearty laughter rang from the other end, loud enough for nearby colleagues to overhear. Director Trong, I'm calling mainly to thank you. Trong Trak froze. Thank me? President Lee laughed again. You're too polite. It's only natural for us to have a pleasant cooperation. I listened to General Director Trong's lecture, held the phone to my ear, and replied, yes, Director Trong, I don't understand the rules. I lack vision. Sorry to disturb you. Don't worry. From now on I'll strictly follow company regulations. The accountant named Vong Tuyet Mai snorted coldly. You think you're impressive or something? If you care so much about that 5,000 yuan and want it reimbursed, I can deduct it from your quarterly bonus. That bonus is company money anyway. Wouldn't that be good for both sides? I had spent my own money for work, and now I was being forced to use my bonus to cover it. Rage surged inside me. Fine, then let's do everything by company policy. Vong Tuyet Mai, the sister-in-law of General Director Trong, always believed employees abused reimbursement policies for personal gain. As the top salesperson, I filed more reimbursements than anyone else, so she disliked me even more. I took the form back to my desk. Tru Thien, my colleague, saw my expression and asked in surprise. Hạ Nghiên, what happened? Last night Director Trong said he'd reimburse everything. Why would Vong Tuyet Mai dare make things difficult? I forced down my anger. It's useless. The director said to follow company policy. Tru Thien looked baffled. What policy could block the reimbursement of someone who just closed a 5 million deal? I gave a stiff smile. Because the average cost per person exceeded 8 yuan. The director wants me to have more vision. She was so angry she almost lost her voice. Just because it went over 8 yuan. They won't reimburse 5,000? That's so unfair. She sounded indignant on my behalf. It really was like that, when there's a 5 million contract. Everyone stands with you, but when it's only 5,000 yuan, they turn their backs. A company like this is truly heartless. The finance office door opened, and Vong Tuyet Mai came out holding a cup, casting us a sharp look. When I opened my email to work, I saw a message in the company group chat. General Director Trong had written, no individual, no matter how good their performance, stands above company regulations, especially certain colleagues who perform well but recently have shown negative behavior, acting as if they're important figures. claiming regulations are a burden and reflect the company's unfairness, even spreading negative emotions in the workplace and affecting team morale. I hope everyone focuses on the right path and doesn't scheme for small personal gains, nor encourage negative thinking. Although he didn't name anyone, everyone knew he meant me. I leaned back in my chair, my chest trembling with anger. I replied to the message, "Understood." Then I picked up the company handbook I had received when I joined and began studying every clause carefully. These are company rules, aren't they? As the top performer, couldn't I control my own compliance? I stopped chatting with colleagues and stopped volunteering for tasks. I only completed assigned work and spent all my time studying the rulebook. General Director Trong seemed very pleased with this change. That afternoon he called me into his office and said seriously, "There's an urgent assignment. The project with a client in City B has run into trouble and needs someone to handle it immediately. The client there is difficult. I'm not comfortable sending anyone else. After thinking it over, I believe you're the most suitable." City B had complicated transportation and a notoriously picky client. It was obviously a job no one wanted. Before, I used to believe sayings like "the capable do more" and "young people must tough it out." So I was often thrown into tough situations. But now I only smiled coldly inside. He didn't give me a chance to refuse. "Prepare yourself. Tomorrow morning you and True Thien leave together. Young people gain more experience by traveling. It's good for you." It seemed this time True Thien had been dragged in with me. I answered calmly, "Yes, Director." He nodded in satisfaction and waved me out. 3 days later, the business trip to City B ended. I took a reimbursement form for 10,000 yuan and stood outside the accounting office. Before entering, I heard General Director Trong inside. "You see, just a little adjustment and Hạ Nghiên became obedient. No more arrogance." Vong Tuyet Mai giggled. "Exactly, brother-in-law, I told you. You should have let me come earlier to straighten out her bad habits." I pushed the door open and handed her the form. She looked it over and shouted angrily, "Hạ Nghiên, 3 days on a business trip and you spent 10,000 yuan? Do you think the company is an ATM?" General Director Trong was also startled. "Emergency notice. Call a full company meeting immediately. You two must explain this clearly to me." I replied calmly, "Then let's explain it at the meeting." Every expense we made fully complied with company regulations. An emergency meeting was convened. General Director Trong roared, 3 days and you spent 10,000. And you still claim it follows regulations? I want to see where that's allowed. Vong Tuyet Mai slammed a stack of receipts onto the table. First, transportation, 5,000 yuan. Plane tickets are discounted now. Round trip is only 2,000. Why did you take high-speed rail? I answered evenly. Company policy clearly states that ordinary employees must travel by high-speed rail on business trips. Her face flushed red with anger. What's wrong with you two? Plane tickets were cheaper. Why weren't you flexible? True Thien nodded. Plane tickets aren't refundable, so we didn't dare change. What about the hotel? She demanded sharply. 3 days cost 5,000. Did you stay in a presidential suite? I nodded. That's right. Because we couldn't find any hotel meeting standards in City B, we had to go to neighboring City A and found a room for 299 a night. Completely within the limit. Then where did the other 5,000 go? Vong Tuyet Mai shouted. President Lee burst out laughing. Not because of the contract. I'm thanking you for giving me such a huge gift. Tomorrow Hạ Nghiên will come to my company to start work. I've truly found a treasure. Trong Trak looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. Frozen in place, Vong Tuyet Mai's mouth fell open. Disbelief written all over her face. No, President Lee, please let me explain. Trong Trak recovered quickly, panic flooding his voice. Hạ Nghiên, she has problems. Her performance looks good, but her character is terrible. She takes commissions behind the company's back and even encourages colleagues to oppose management. We only discovered it recently and fired her. Don't be deceived by her. Director Trong, President Lee's voice suddenly turned cold. I know exactly what kind of person Hạ Nghiên is. As for you, It's not like I learned about you only today. You think I can't see what's going on inside your company? He chuckled lightly. I don't mind telling you this. At first, Hạ Nghiên didn't even plan to work for me. I made a bet with her. Trong Trak asked instinctively, his voice trembling. A bet? About what? President Lee's tone dripped with mockery. I bet that you and your accountant would never let her easily receive the bonus from that $1 million order. And I won. Trong Trak staggered and had to grab the edge of the desk to steady himself. I pulled out a cardboard box and began packing my belongings. Hạ Nghiên, he shouted hoarsely. You're really an ungrateful traitor. Think about your conscience. Who helped you when you first joined? Who taught you how to meet clients and write proposals? Who gave you leave when you were sick and advanced your salary? Have you forgotten all that? He spoke rapidly, listing memory after memory, trying to bind me with past gratitude, trying to brand me a betrayer. Around us, several colleagues, especially the long-timers, looked conflicted, as if his words stirred memories of the hard early days. I stopped and looked at him quietly, at his face twisted with anger and disappointment, until he finished shouting and glared at me, panting. The office fell silent, every eye was fixed on me. Waiting, I nodded slightly, my expression calm. Yes, Director Trong, you treated me very well in the past. When the company had only 7 or 8 people, you personally guided me and gave me opportunities. I, Hạ Nghiên, will always remember that kindness. And I repaid it with everything I had, countless sleepless nights. Deal after deal, I helped the company survive its hardest period and grow. I glanced at the veteran colleagues around the room. They lowered their heads, as if remembering those difficult days too. But, Director Trong, I looked straight at him. After the company grew, from a handful of people to 70 or 80. From a rented apartment office to a modern building. From Brother Trong to Director Trong, how did you treat me? I enunciated every word like a blade. Did you treat me like a disposable tool? Someone you could deceive, conceal things from, and force to obey your so-called rules so you could take the rewards I deserved? Did you allow your sister-in-law to fabricate lies and smear my reputation? Or after I signed a $5 million contract, did you label me unqualified so you could swallow over 100,000 in bonus money? Each word didn't just strike Trong Trak, it echoed through the hearts of everyone present. Director Trong, loyalty goes both ways. You used past favors from the startup days to force me to accept injustice now that the company has grown. That isn't loyalty, it's calculation. I was grateful for your early support. So when the company needed me, I gave it everything, but I must also protect my dignity and rightful interests now. So I've decided to leave. When I finished, I glanced at him. His face was pale and stiff, unable to say a word. With nothing left to regret, I picked up my box and walked out. Behind me came an angry roar. Hạ Nghiên, don't play word games. Who do you think you are? Without you the company will run just fine. Let me tell you something, I'm the one firing you. You're dismissed. I stopped, turned back, and asked calmly, Director Trong, are you confirming you're firing me? Yes, he shouted without thinking. You're fired. An employee like you who doesn't respect superiors doesn't belong here. Good, I nodded lightly. Then please issue a formal termination notice according to regulations and pay statutory compensation. Under labor law, if an employer unilaterally terminates an employee without fault, compensation must be paid at N+1. I've worked here 3 years. So you owe me 4 months' salary. Of course, if the company lacks legal grounds, the dismissal will be considered unlawful, and compensation doubles to 8 months' salary. Director Trong, which procedure will you choose? His hand trembled as he pointed at me. Speechless, only now did he realize what a foolish mistake he'd made in his rage. Saying, "You're fired," was easy. But the financial price was something neither he nor Vong Tuyat Mai wanted to bear. She clutched his sleeve anxiously and whispered, "Brother-in-law, you can't fire her. You'll have to pay compensation." The whole office went silent. No one had expected things to turn out like this. I watched the two of them flounder and felt only irony. People who loved using power to bully others were the most frightened when rules actually protected the weak. But I didn't want to waste time arguing about compensation. My worth wasn't measured by a few months' salary. I set down my box, took out my phone, and called Trong Trak. He stared blankly at my name on his screen, then answered. Hello, Trong Trak? This is Hạ Nghiên, about the 5 million contract between your company and ours. There are a few details to confirm. President Lee has authorized me to handle it fully. Tomorrow, please bring your company seal to our office to sign in person. I'll be waiting. I ignored the fury blazing in his eyes. Everyone held their breath, stunned by the turn of events. His face flushed red with anger and humiliation. He wanted to refuse, but didn't dare. A 5 million contract, a major client like President Lee, plus the risk of investigations into management violations and other serious issues. He couldn't bear the consequences of saying no. Grinding his teeth, swallowing his rage, he forced out a single word. Fine. Carrying my box, I smiled and walked past my former colleagues. This time no one dared stop me or mock me. The welcome gathering when I joined President Lee's company was simple but warm. In front of the entire team, he officially entrusted me with full responsibility for the next phase of the 5 million project and announced that my salary would be doubled. Hạ Nghiên, you understand this project best. Leaving it to you puts me completely at ease. He paused, looking at me carefully. Of course, I know this might be difficult for you, since you'll be dealing with your former company. If you feel uncomfortable, we can adjust. It's fine, President Lee. Work is work. I'll handle it well. Excellent. He patted my shoulder lightly. Satisfied. I trust you. Before long, Trong Trak appeared, his face tight with suppressed resentment. Throughout the signing process he didn't dare look at me once. I showed no arrogance and didn't take the chance to make things difficult for him. Everything I did was swift, professional, and strictly business. But when the project began and I needed to coordinate technical details with his company, he completely lost control. During a coordination meeting, I asked, based on the contract terms, about a delayed deliverable. Trong Trak exploded like a lit bomb, slammed the table, stood up, and shouted, Hạ Nghiên, stop showing off borrowed authority. You think changing sides gives you the right to boss people around? Picking on Shoutiet to make things hard for me, isn't that just revenge and slander? Don't even dream of it. I tried to explain it was a normal part of project procedure. But he refused to listen. In his warped world, any interaction between us now, even under the name of business partners, was seen as deliberate humiliation. And behind him, Vong Tuyet Mai kept fanning the flames. See? I told you, she sneered. She's ungrateful. The moment she gets a little power, she comes back to step on our heads. From that moment on, everything began to spiral off course. They didn't dare violate the contract openly, but they began playing dirty behind the scenes. The documents they sent were vague, the technical parameters constantly full of errors, making things extremely difficult for my technical team. Progress slowed. Their project lead was always in a meeting. Emails went unanswered, calls ignored. Even the simplest tasks were delayed indefinitely. Trong Trak started spreading rumors in the industry, saying I was abusing my authority to take revenge on my former company, deliberately making things hard for them, that I had no professional ethics. I compiled everything, attached the evidence, wrote a detailed report, and submitted it to President Lee's company's legal department. Legal immediately sent a serious warning letter to Trong Trak. That made them hesitate temporarily. But it didn't mean they stopped. Trong Trak and Vong Tuyet Mai's tactics became more sophisticated and discreet. They kept skirting the rules, exploiting procedural loopholes, quietly obstructing the project with relentless persistence. The project fell into a state of near impossibility. Legally, there were no major violations, but in practice every step of implementation was blocked. I poured all my strength into patching one hole, putting out another fire, like a firefighter running everywhere, extinguishing blazes that never stopped. Physically and mentally, I was exhausted. I gradually realized that as long as this project remained in Trong Trak's hands, As long as they still harbored resentment, it would never be completed and would instead become a black hole swallowing my time and resources. If this continued, what would be damaged wouldn't just be me but also President Lee's company's resources, reputation, and opportunities. That completely contradicted my original purpose in taking the project, to create value for my new company, not to sink into an endless war with the past. After many sleepless nights of deliberation, I made a difficult but resolute decision. I knocked on President Lee's office door and placed a detailed report along with my final proposal on his desk. President Lee, I'm very sorry to disappoint you. Based on the current situation, Trong Trak's company is completely uncooperative. The project risk has exceeded control. If we continue, the losses will definitely be worse. I formally propose terminating cooperation with them and canceling the $5 million contract. Saying those words felt like my heart was being cut open, because all the effort I had poured in for so long now felt as if it were being washed down the drain. President Lee silently read the report. He didn't blame me, his eyes were full of understanding. They forced you to cut off one of your own arms. He tapped the desk lightly and sighed. Are you truly certain? President Lee, I looked up. My gaze showed not only exhaustion but firm resolve. Compared to letting a broken project drag me down, ending it at the right time is better. Giving up $5 million today so I can earn more in the future. I need to save my strength and resources for battles that matter. President Lee looked at me for a long moment, then slowly nodded. All right, I approve. His tone was calm but decisive. Hạ Nghiên, to make this decision, you must have gone through a lot. This lesson is valuable, and I hope you remember it. In business, sometimes letting go requires greater wisdom and courage than holding on. I understand. I took a deep breath. It was obvious Trong Trak and Vong Tuyat Mai had already learned through their own channels that the $5 million project had been suspended. My phone lit up, Trong Trak calling. His voice came through, restrained but unable to hide the gloating underneath. Hello, Manager Ha, I heard your $5 million project seems to have been suspended. What happened? Trouble? The smugness in his tone practically seeped out of the speaker. I didn't bother pretending politeness and cut him off coldly. Why was the project suspended? I think you know better than anyone. Ha ha, Trong Trak laughed. So what if you changed jobs? Hạ Nghiên, what did grabbing President Lee's thigh get you? In the end you still couldn't control the situation, right? His voice carried the air of someone lecturing a subordinate. I told you before, young people shouldn't be too arrogant. Do you think the outside world is that easy? If I hadn't guided you back then, if I hadn't taught you how to work, would you have the success you have today? Now that your wings are hardened, you want to fly off? I'm telling you honestly, the older the ginger, the spicier it is. No matter what, you're still not my match. If this had been in the past, I might have trembled with anger. But now I only smiled faintly, a smile that made him even angrier. What are you laughing at? Trong Trak snapped irritably. I'm laughing because you used every trick you had and thought you'd snapped off a small branch. But it seems you forgot that behind me now stands an entire forest, while you're rotting the very roots that once supported your company. After saying that, I hung up decisively. What awaited Trong Trak wasn't a notice of a new project lead from President Lee's company, but an official document from its legal department. Immediately afterward, President Lee called me. The phone was on speaker. We were both in the conference room. On the other end, Trong Trak's voice sounded deliberately enthusiastic. President Lee, hello. I heard your company seems to be having a little trouble with the new project. I'm very sorry to hear that. But please rest assured, we'll do our best to cooperate and complete the previous $5 million contract. May I ask who will be taking over on your side? President Lee didn't waste words and cut straight in. President Trong, there's no need to arrange anyone. Oh? Trong Trak sounded surprised. What do you mean? I mean, President Lee said clearly and firmly, the $5 million contract between our two companies is hereby officially terminated. What? Terminated? Trong Trak shouted. President Lee, are you joking? That's a formal contract with legal effect. Canceling it unilaterally requires breach of contract compensation. President Lee chuckled, a low, cold sound echoing through the conference room. President Trong, you're absolutely right. The compensation clause is already stated clearly in the legal letter. For a partner who has demonstrated insufficient integrity and caused nothing but trouble and losses, stopping at the right time is the smartest business decision. My company can afford to pay that penalty. There was suffocating silence on the other end. President Lee said nothing more and hung up. I looked at him, admiration rising in my chest. He looked back at me and smiled. Did you hear that? That's the attitude of losing money rather than losing face. I set the matter aside. Ahead of me waited a bigger project. In that moment, I knew I had made the right decision, the right person to follow, the right foundation on which to build a future. A few months later, I sat in a spacious office flooded with light. I had just finished signing a contract for a project worth tens of millions. Outside, the team was cheering in celebration. True Theme sent me a message. I heard President Trong's company has been struggling since losing the $5 million contract. Their reputations dropped, and they might be heading for bankruptcy. And Vong Tuyat Mai was found to have multiple audit irregularities. She's under investigation now. I read the message without the slightest ripple in my heart. I hadn't become a copy of Trong Trak, nor someone like Vong Tuyat Mai. At my new company, I had proactively proposed changes to the reimbursement policy, adding flexible mechanisms for significant contributions. I believed rules were created to serve people, not for people to become slaves to rules. A copy of that 5 yuan reimbursement form from years ago still lay beneath the glass on my desk. It wasn't a wound, it was a medal, a symbol of a Hạ Nghiên who had once been passionate and naive, but who had awakened, and it was a reminder that I must never become the kind of person I once hated. That's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please like the video, subscribe to China Story Tales, and stay tuned for more stories.